Welcome to this episode in which we will discuss how students can choose their own path. There's a passage in the Bible, Psalms 23, which states, "Your rod and your staff comfort me." This draws upon the metaphor of a shepherd taking care of its sheep. The rod, it's not meant to beat the sheep. Rather, it's meant to protect the sheep from threats that exist, especially when the sheep get caught. The staff, on the other hand, is meant to guide the sheep and set the pace down the paths which are most effective. Now, this rod and staff metaphor, in which the teacher can restore the student from risk, provide guidance down the correct path, and choose the pace which is most appropriate for the student. This allows the student to take ownership over their path. Ownership removes the resistance to learning. Ownership reduces the fear that might come from the failure down the path. And finally, ownership builds a sense of self-regulation or perseverance through the difficulties ahead. When we say that students can choose their own path, it means we give them a sense of ownership. It means that the teacher is their guide, the teacher sets their pace, and the teacher restores them when they're trapped or struggling. I'd like to explore 3 strategies which teachers can use to enable students to choose their own path. One is Constructivism. The most well-known method of this is the Montessori method. Now, I'm not saying we all should become Montessori schools, but the principle is the same. The second is a term called scaffolding. And the third strategy, which will help students choose their path, is just the idea of choice. Constructivism is simply the idea of constructing an environment in which the students choose what happens next. When a shepherd is out there with their sheep, they might let the sheep wander, but it's down a certain set of paths, because the shepherd knows there are certain paths that we really don't want to go down. In the same way, when a teacher sets up their classroom, putting posters on the wall or putting a skeleton in the corner, all of this is an attempt to create the environment in which learning can happen. But the one thing that needs to happen is the student should experience learning through that environment. So we create the environment, but how do we allow the student to explore the environment? If a student is in a classroom with beautiful pictures of biological systems of the human body or of the plant cell or the animal cell, but yet those pictures just stay on the wall and there's no interaction between student and diagram, the idea of constructivist education is not happening. We want to be able to build the learning environment and through that learning environment generate learning experiences. The second one was scaffolding. The idea of scaffolding is just allowing students to get to that next step. They determine what step they're on, because finally this is a journey taken step by step. Some students will be on step 4, some students will be on step 10, some might be on step 35. But scaffolding allows the student to somehow get to the next step, to get unstuck. It's like a fitness trainer at a gym. When that fitness trainer is spotting you when you're lifting weights, and they're spotting you, their job is not to lift the weight for you, but their job is to make sure that you don't go backwards. But the idea is motivation, without doing it for them. Giving them a different option to try, giving them a different resource to use, but not necessarily telling them what that resource says or does. One key ingredient to scaffolding is that there should not be a dependency on the teacher. The teacher is just introducing the next resource or the next path or the next option. The teacher themselves is not that path or option. And the third strategy is simply choice. There has to be an element of choice somewhere. The student should choose what homework to do, or what activity to do, or what diagram to consider as they're studying. In middle school, for example, most science topics are all independent of each other. You can actually pick any one chapter and teach that, because force is independent of electromagnetism. These things can be done based on the student's choice. So why not allow them to choose which chapter to start with first? Let it be the one that's most exciting to them. The idea of choice boards is just the idea of introducing choice. These three strategies are meant to ensure that the students have the option of effective paths. And just like the rod, make sure that the student does not go down ineffective paths. And the idea of scaffolding is the staff encouraging students to move on, encouraging them to take the next step. But ultimately, through it all, the student has the impression that they are in control of their own destiny. They are making choices. They are choosing which step to be on. Now, implementing these three strategies, constructivism, scaffolding, and choice, can be both very simple as well as extremely complicated. I leave it up to you to decide how far you're willing to go. All that I recommend is, in your lesson plan, you have incorporated these concepts at some degree. If it's as simple as allowing them to choose which chapter to study or which topic they want to present on. If it's as simple as giving the students who need support an extra resource and giving the students who are beyond the level of the class an extra resource. As long as within your plans you have these placeholders for scaffolding, for constructivist environments, and for choice, then to at least some extent, you're slowly instilling within the student the idea that they are in control, that they are taking ownership of their own education.